So, World War III? Maybe? A lot of people have been talking about the United States' recent killing of the Iranian military commander Qasem Soleimani and Trump's threat to continue attacking Iran, and talking about how ridiculous all of this is, and saying hashtag no war with Iran. And I'm with you. Yes, no war with Iran. But I haven't seen that many people talk about the evangelical influence that led to this attack and the potential war with Iran. I want to talk about Evangelical Secretary of State Mike Pompeo and some of Trump's other evangelical friends, who all fully believe that war with Iran will lead to the second coming of Jesus Christ. Now, before we dive into this disgusting abyss, let me do the classic hashtag not all Christians here, because not all Christians think like this, including me. I'm a Christian. I'm not an evangelical Christian, but very much a Christian. But not even all evangelicals think like this. In fact, it's just a small minority of a few powerful evangelical leaders that think like this. But they've been very deceitful, and they've manipulated a lot of evangelicals into thinking the way they do. But a lot of evangelical Trump supporters don't actually even understand what they're supporting. So let's get into it.
I don't know if you know what was happening, but he was planning a very major attack, and we got him.
So we now know that Secretary of State Mike Pompeo was actually lobbying for Trump to order an attack on Soleimani for several months, claiming that Soleimani was organizing attacks against Americans. And it seemed like his efforts were wasted, because you would expect that when you have no evidence for the claims. Then on December 27th, a U.S. contractor was killed in an attack on a base in northern Iraq. Pompeo was able to make a connection of the death with an Iraqi Shiite militia connected to Soleimani, and he finally had enough to convince Trump to attack. Because the thing is, Pompeo didn't want Trump to attack Soleimani because of the specific violence that Soleimani was guilty of. Pompeo's goal here was war with Iran, and you even get hints of that from Trump's tweets after the killing of Soleimani. By the way, back in March of 2019, Pompeo was interviewed by the Christian Broadcasting Network, and they were celebrating Trump's recognition of Israel, and the journalists were making connections with the story of Esther, who was raised for such a time as this to a royal position, as the scriptures say, in order to save the Israelites from the kingdom of Persia and the evil Haman that was trying to wipe out the Israelites at the time. Iran, by the way, is now where Persia once was. So here's what they ask Pompeo. Look at this clip.
Could it be that President Trump right now has been sort of raised for such a time as this, just like Queen Esther, to help save the Jewish people from an Iranian menace?
As a Christian, I certainly believe that's possible. It was remarkable. So we were down in the tunnels where we could see 3,000 years ago and 2,000 years ago, if I have the history just right, to see the remarkable history of the faith in this place and the work that our administration has done to make sure that this democracy in the Middle East of this Jewish state remains. I'm confident that the Lord is at work here.
Now, Pompeo has been talking about evangelical end times prophecy and foreign policy in the same breath for years. 3 years ago, he spoke at Summit Church's God and Country rally in Wichita, and he said this.
We will continue to fight these battles. It is a never-ending struggle until that moment Pastor Fox spoke about, until the rapture. Be part of it. Be in the fight. Ask for forgiveness. Seek his wisdom. And heed your pastor's call to actions. And great things will be bestowed upon our nation and our world.
Mike Pompeo is also a known member of the Family. The Family is a powerful Christian conservative group who established the National Prayer Breakfast in the U.S., but also all over the world in several countries in order to build connections between countries and their leaders, all based on the idea that Jesus will be spread throughout the world if we get powerful world leaders to accept Jesus and to say Jesus, no matter the injustices they commit. It's all about power. So what has been happening during the entire existence of Trump's administration has been powerful people using each other for their own agendas of gaining more power. That's also why the Trump administration contradicts itself so much. The only constant is a thirst for power. And part of that constant is a support for Israel. Now, you'd assume logically that evangelicals would actually be in support of Palestine, particularly because of the Palestinian Christians that are persecuted there by Israeli forces. But all the ways that Palestinians suffer are irrelevant to the larger goal of Israel expanding and reestablishing themselves and rebuilding the temple, covering the entire land that they were originally promised in the Torah. That's why several evangelical leaders are opposed to any sort of agreements or peace between Israel and Palestine. They don't want Israel to remain where it is. They want it to expand. Evangelical leaders will gladly support any attack on Iran because they'll gladly support any attack on any enemy of Israel. But they particularly support any piece of land that was originally covered in the original promised land of Israel in the Bible, which originally covered what is now Jordan, Lebanon, Syria, Iraq, a small part of Kuwait, a small part of Egypt to the left. Several evangelical leaders have been begging for an attack on Iran for decades for this reason. A big proponent for attacking Iran in defense of Israel has been popular TV preacher John Hagee, who founded one of the largest pro-Israel lobbying groups called Christians United for Israel. Here's a clip from 2005 from Bill Moyer's show of John Hagee talking about attacking Iran.
It is time for America to consider a military preemptive strike against Iran to prevent a nuclear holocaust in Israel and a nuclear attack in America.
In 2015, when Obama signed the nuclear deal with Iran, John Hagee said Obama was sticking a finger in the eye of God for not supporting Israel and for supporting Iran over Israel. And let's make this clear too. A big reason so many evangelical leaders hated Obama was actually rooted in Obama's refusal to support the expansion of Israel. Listen. If Obama supported Israel the way that Trump does now, you would have seen all these Obama-hating evangelical leaders actually supporting Obama the whole time, probably forgiving his stances on gay marriage and abortion the way that they forgive Trump now for his racism and misogyny. And here's John Hagee in 2018 at the U.S. Embassy Jerusalem dedication ceremony.
Let every Islamic terrorist hear this message: Israel lives. Let it be heard in the halls of the United Nations: Israel lives. Let it echo down the marble halls of the presidential palace in Iran: Israel lives. Let it be known to all men that Israel lives, because he that keepeth Israel neither slumbers nor sleeps. As King David prayed 3,000 years ago.
The American Jewish Committee's senior interreligious advisor, Rabbi James Rudin, said, "The current administration is in sync with John Hagee. I think we're seeing an affinity between Hagee's ideology and the political actions of the Trump administration. He's emerged, as we saw in Jerusalem, as one of the nation's most prominent evangelical leaders." And these evangelical leaders believe that a significant precedent to the second coming of Jesus is the reestablishing of the land of Israel, a fully Jewish Jerusalem, and a rebuilding of the Jewish temple, and a violent war that will take place in Israel at Armageddon. And at the peak of this giant violent world war, Jesus will return, come down from the clouds, and destroy all of the enemies of Israel. Which is also why the United States has to make sure that we're on Israel's side, so that when God destroys all the enemies of Israel, he sees us as part of Israel. By the way, when you understand just basic biblical interpretation, you're able to see that this is actually a poetic vision of the end of all empirical oppressive powers in order for the oppressed to live free from those oppressive powers. And in the time of writing that passage, that powers that I was referring to would have been primarily referencing Rome. And to apply that passage today would be to primarily reference nations like the United States. So instead of responsible biblical interpretation, their logic here is to read Revelation absolutely literally, continue all the injustice and imperialism in the world, but ally with Israel until the end so that when Jesus comes back and destroys all the enemies of Israel, he sees us as part of Israel too. So evangelicals support the expansion of Israel because they believe that the reestablishment of Israel and the war that comes after is a precedent to the second coming of Jesus. And Orthodox Jews in Israel push for the expansion of Israel because they believe in a sort of similar thing, that the reestablishment of Israel and the rebuilding of the Jewish temple is a precedent for the first coming of the Messiah, since they don't believe Jesus was the Messiah. But they take money and support from Christians who believe that Jesus will save them in the end or destroy them if they don't convert, because they'll take any support that they could get. Now, this idea of the reestablishment of Israel and the rebuilding of the Jewish temple in order for Jesus to come back and all that is really a modern twisting of scriptures, mainly from Revelation and Daniel and Isaiah. And they take random verses and half verses and string them together as if they were a singular perspective. And it is such a strange twisting of scripture that I can't even get into all of the verses that they use and how they twist them and what they really mean, because that would be too much just for this video. That's not really what this video is about. So here's just a couple examples. The second half of Luke 21:24 says, Jerusalem will be trampled on by the Gentiles until the times of the Gentiles are fulfilled. And they take that out of context and say that it's saying Jerusalem will be returned to the Jews, and that will be right before Jesus comes back. Oh, and Isaiah 66:8 says, Who has heard of such a thing? Who has seen such things? Shall a land be born in one day? Shall a nation be delivered in one moment? Yet as soon as Zion was in labor, she delivered her children. And that part about a nation being born in one day, they say, is a prophecy of the reestablishment of Israel. It's all ridiculous, but evangelical churchgoers are easily convinced when the pastor presents them with this long list of scriptures and he babbles through them quickly and makes it seem like he's getting all this from large chunks of the Bible, when really he's just reading random little bits scattered throughout the Bible. So this is why evangelicals support Israel. But I should also make clear that several evangelicals aren't even aware of all these details. It's just an in-group thing for a lot of evangelicals to support Israel. They don't really know why they support Israel or what's going on over there. They just know that they should support Israel. And when you read scriptures every week about Israel as God's chosen people, it is really easy for a pastor to convince people that references to Israel and the Bible are also references to the modern state of Israel and that they're exactly the same thing. And a lot of evangelicals just say, cool, okay, yeah, I support Israel. I don't know what's going on over there, but yeah, I support Israel. That's God's people. So yes, a lot of evangelicals support Israel for very disgusting reasons, but before you go on assuming every Israel-supporting evangelical have the same disgusting worldview, it is important to acknowledge that several evangelicals support Israel without knowing why. And even the ones that do know about supporting Israel's expansion in order to bait the second coming probably don't even know how it became an evangelical cause in the first place. The majority of evangelicals were usually apolitical and pretty diverse in their political opinions until the late 70s with the establishment of the moral majority by people like Paul Weyrich and Jerry Falwell and others. And so the marriage of evangelicalism and republicanism really began in the 80s with the election of Ronald Reagan, who partnered with the moral majority, and evangelicals weren't staunch supporters of Israel until the Republican Party was. And the Republican Party wasn't a staunch supporter of Israel until after 9/11, when they saw Israel as an ally against Islam. But underneath all the antagonism against Muslims in the Middle East isn't really a fear that they'll attack the US. The real reason for the antagonism against Israel's neighboring Muslim nations and for the support of this allied nation to expand across those lands is, as Trump put it when he ordered for American soldiers to stay in Syria, to secure the oil. So like I said, the entire existence of Trump's administration has been powerful people using each other for their own agendas of gaining power. And so Trump attacking Iran now serves multiple purposes for his campaign for re-election. First, he's strengthening his evangelical base because he's supporting Israel, but he's also doing what these evangelical leaders around him have been asking him to do by attacking Iran, and so they'll go and support him and endorse him even stronger. And it also allows Trump to continue to fearmonger, telling his supporters, you better make sure to re-elect me as president so that I can continue protecting you from dangerous Iran. By the way, it's so hard for me to say that with a straight face because when it comes to the United States versus Iran, the United States is the dangerous threat here. This idea that we need protection from dangerous Iran is such a ridiculous, manipulative fantasy. And also another thing people are pointing out is that no wartime president has ever been defeated for re-election. For example, James Madison with the War of 1812, re-elected in 1812. Abraham Lincoln with the Civil War, re-elected in 1864. Woodrow Wilson nearing World War I, re-elected in 1916. Franklin D. Roosevelt nearing World War II, re-elected in 1940, and then at war, re-elected in 1944. Lyndon B. Johnson using the Vietnam War issue with the Gulf of Tonkin, elected in 1964. Richard Nixon with the Vietnam War, re-elected in 1972. George W. Bush with the Iraq and Afghanistan wars, re-elected in 2004. And Obama continuing the Afghanistan wars, re-elected in 2012. And for those that respond to Trump criticisms by saying, yeah, well, what about when Obama did it? Yeah, I'm against Obama for doing those things too. Both Trump and Obama are bad presidents. Trump even warned us that Obama was up to this stereotypical behavior in 2012 when he tweeted, in order to get reelected, Barack Obama will start a war with Iran. And no, Trump isn't ignorant. It's just more power moves that will be masked as protecting America and will be masked by his evangelical supporters as fulfilling biblical prophecy. And if you're a Christian, please get educated as much as you can on what is happening in Israel so you can understand that the modern state of Israel created in 1948 and the biblical Israel are wildly different things. And everyone, whenever you hear people quote random Bible verses as biblical prophecies for the end times being revealed today in the Middle East, ask them what those verses are. They probably don't know them. And if they do know some of them, read the verses around those verses, or sometimes just the other half of the verse. Sometimes it feels like the solution to Christian fundamentalism is to just read Bible verses in their context. It's sad sometimes. But trust me, people, the Jesus story is so much better than the modern perversions that have been made by these few powerful men and have deceived so many people. And if any evangelicals are watching this and you made it all the way to the end here, good on you, you little rebel. This last part is for you. I very much believe that the evangelical leaders around Trump are the kind of people that Paul was talking about when he said in Ephesians 5:11, take no part in the unfruitful works of darkness, but instead expose them. For it is shameful even to mention what such people do secretly. But everything exposed by the light becomes visible, for everything that becomes visible is light. Therefore it says, sleeper, awake, rise from the dead, and Christ will shine on you. That's a first century way of saying stay woke, so wake up. Thank you for watching this, everybody. I left some important links in the description, so make sure you check those out. Also, make sure to subscribe and check out more videos on this channel. And also follow me on Twitch, twitch.tv/whoisdamon, where we stream and talk about this kind of stuff, but in a more freeform and interactive way. Also, if you'd like to support me, I'd greatly appreciate it. You can also get access to over 30 exclusive videos if you support me on Patreon, patreon.com/damongarcia. I'd greatly appreciate any support from there. So shout out to my patrons already over there: Keith Wetzel, Blake the Bold, Stephen Harp, Ranger Jenny, Refined Your Scene, James Finlay, New Transcendentalist, Kristen Mouse, Mike Togman, Peter John Blake, Mimi McGann, Callie, Onion, Keegan James, Tammy D, and everyone else. Thank you all so much, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye-bye.